What's up guys, TheMrTrails here, and due to going on vacation and then getting COVID right after that, along with a mix of a couple other things, I hadn't actually played Monster Hunter Rise for like a month until a couple days ago. But there was a bit of a reason that I stopped playing for a bit before going on vacation, and it had been so long that I kind of forgot what that reason was. But after queuing up a hunt for my first Seething Basilguise, I remembered why. I remembered why there was a sour taste left in my mouth for Monster Hunter Rise Sunbreak Endgame. The main culprit of it was Scorned Magnamalo, and it wasn't because it was more difficult than a regular Magnamalo or anything like that. It's because it seems like the endgame of Sunbreak doesn't really know how to properly balance ranged weapons. For Monster Hunter, part of the way they balance ranged weapons is they give melee weapons a bit of extra physical defense. So this basically means like 90% of the monster's attacks, they will deal extra damage when you are running a ranged weapon. And once you hit the very endgame of Sunbreak monsters, this will basically force a ranged weapon to use defense boost. Without using defense boost against Scorned Magnamalo for the first time, I was literally one-shot to every single attack from it. And then even with full defense boost and full dragon resistance to up the defense rating that much more, I was still going to be two-shot to pretty much every attack, which is more manageable. But when there are multiple attacks that will attempt to hit you multiple times and you can die very easily from that if you wirefall in the wrong direction, or say you just did a slight flinch from the first attack and then the second attack hits you immediately after that before you could literally do anything, getting two-shot while trying to max out your defenses is pretty unbalanced. But then I basically took that same build and perk summary to a longsword instead, and I was taking less than a third of my health damage every time Magnamalo hit me. Meaning on a melee weapon, I would need to get hit 4 times to die. And naturally, because of that, I didn't die a single time once I switched over to a melee weapon. The reason this left a sour taste in my mouth is I don't believe that you should feel forced to run any particular perk summary to avoid dying in a certain encounter. But the game takes it one step further, and even with that forced perk summary to try to avoid dying, you kind of feel like you have to run a different weapon altogether. And this really sucked for me because against regular Magnamalo, I really liked playing bow against it. But just because the damage was overtuned for ranged weapons, that if I wanted to fight Scorned Magnamalos, I would have to do it with a melee weapon. And in my opinion, with the amount of extra defense that I was throwing into the build, I probably should have been 3-shot to the monsters, not 2-shot. If I was 3-shot the majority of time, then I probably wouldn't have felt as bad about this, because the chances of getting hit 3 times in a row before you're able to do anything are much lower than the chances of getting hit twice in a row without having been able to do anything. Now, of course, there's a simple answer, just don't take damage, lol. But that isn't going to be quite as easy as it sounds, especially because your ranged weapons are likely going to have to fight longer against these monsters, because the attempts to balance the ranged weapons doesn't end there. Not only are you going to take more damage from these attacks, but you are also going to deal less damage against the monster. For those who don't know, the monsters in Monster Hunter have damage hit zones based on what part you are hitting, and which damage hit zones are good are going to depend on which weapons you are using as well. What type of weapon damage does your weapon inflict? The main types being severing, blunt, and projectile. And wouldn't you know it, the projectile damage type against Scorned Magnamalo is also just complete garbage. The chart from the wiki sums it up pretty well. The head hit zone, you have a base 45, which is lower than base 50 and base 55 from severing and blunt weapons. The worst damage hit zone for a severing weapon is going to be 35 from the upper half and bottom half, basically the back and stomach. And the worst damage hit zone for a blunt weapon is going to be on the tail, where it gets 30. But this worst damage hit zone for a blunt weapon matches the second best damage hit zone for projectile weapons. This 30 base hit zone is going to be on the front and back legs. But for the rest of the body parts, you have a 10 base effectiveness for the projectile damage. But when Magnamalo is enraged, all weapons will have a 45 effectiveness against the arm blades, which will grow on the front legs. But this means for about half of the fight or more, you have to be hitting the face for a ranged weapon to be dealing a respectable amount of damage. And naturally, with how much Scorned Magnamalo is going to move around, it is going to be a bit of a difficult task to hit the face very frequently. And when your arrows are missing the face and hitting the back instead, congratulations, you're dealing 22% of the damage you would have. That's just disgusting. And it's these disgusting damage hit zones, along with the fact that you just take a ton more damage with projectile weapons, that the Sunbreak endgame left me with a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. Because I want to play the weapon that I want to play, not the weapon the game wants me to play. Seething Basilgues, the damage hit zones aren't as bad, but you still do take a ton more damage when playing a ranged weapon. And when I was fighting it and experienced this damage, it immediately made me remember why I had a very sour taste in my mouth from Scorn to Magnum Aloe. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree? Are these things overtuned a little bit? Or is this just simply a difference in skill? It's not that I can't kill these monsters, it's just unnecessarily more difficult when using a ranged weapon, in my opinion. When playing solo, that is, where you don't have anybody else to take aggro for a second after you get hit. But that'll be it for this one. Now that I'm back in the swing of things, I will probably be revisiting Monster Hunter World sometime soon, for which I think I might start a new save file again. Because having more knowledge of mechanics and equipment from playing Rise for a couple hundred hours, that will probably help me out in the early game of the World story. Plus, I kind of just forget what I was doing in World because it's been so long. So look out for that coming relatively soon. But that'll be it from me. I have been Trevor, I go by the Mr. Trails, and I will catch you guys next time.